Thanks. All right, good morning, everybody. We'll just wait a few seconds here for everyone to get into the webinar. Hopefully everyone's sound is working okay and you can hear me well, but we'll just wait a few more seconds here. Okay. Yeah, I think we can get started. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar today from wherever you are in Alberta or maybe across Canada as well. My name's Carrie Morton. I'm the Director of Business Support Services at BusinessLink, and I want to thank you for joining the webinar today. So at BusinessLink, we are honored to provide services to all entrepreneurs and specialty services to our immigrant and Indigenous entrepreneurs. We are inclusive in our cultural understanding and awareness of the histories of our country. With that, we'll start the event with a land acknowledgement to recognize all of Alberta. We want to acknowledge that in the province of Alberta, we're situated on the traditional territories of Treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, ancestral homeland of diverse First Nations groups, Métis, and Indigenous people whose ancestors have walked this land since time immemorial and whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. We pay respects to the Indigenous people of this land, past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land on which we reside. So again, thank you for joining us for the webinar today. We have Karthik Balachander joining us to present on getting and growing your website traffic, the basics. So if you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please click on Q&A in the meeting controls and type a message into the question box. We will be taking questions at the end. So if we don't respond to your question right away, we are saving it for the end and we'll get to as many questions as we can. If there are any questions asked of you throughout the presentation, you can just participate in those through the chat. You can just simply type your answers into the chat box to all participants. Just a note that the information provided in this session is for general knowledge and should not be taken as professional advice. So it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today. Karthik is the marketing manager at Webnames.ca, and he's an engineer turned marketer with a keen eye for consumer behavior and digital analytics. He brings over 8 years of experience in marketing strategy and operations for tech products, and he applies his technology background and aptitude for behavioral analysis for results in marketing. So thank you, Karthik, for joining us today. I'll let you take it away.
Yep, thank you. Good morning to everyone. As Carrie mentioned, we will be taking questions at the end, so feel free to put it in there. And if not, I will also be leaving my contact details in both the handout and towards the end of the deck. So you can feel free to email us regarding questions. So without much ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so a number of you might have been on this same session last week when we spoke about how you can get started with planning for your website, why your business needs a website, and what are the different elements you should consider while getting started with a website. Today, we're going to look at the next step from that, which is how do you get traffic to your website. Before we do that, I'm just, in case you did not make it for the previous session, brief on who we are as Webnames.ca. We are Canada's first .ca domain registrar, and of course for the world. Our founder, John Demko, was the inventor of the .ca domains on the campus of UBC in Vancouver. And our CEO and co-founder, Sibel Negris, was part of the same team, and together They set up the .ca domains before eventually setting up this registrar. We help companies across Canada with domain names, business email, SSL certificates, web hosting, and all these other services that small businesses require. We are 100% Canadian. All the data that we customers store with us is located, like our data centers are located in Canada. And we are passionate about a number of social causes, including women and girls in science and technology education for women entrepreneurship, given that Sibel herself is a person of color and a CEO in the tech space. She's been through that and she understands the hurdles that she had to surmount. So the one thing that we pride ourselves on is our quality of support. And we like to fashion ourselves as your allies on the web. Last week, we spoke about an overview of things and goals from that particular session. Similarly, today, what you can expect is to build a framework which will help you answer these three important questions. What kind of traffic is the right kind for your website? And how does that align with your business goals? And therefore, how do you nurture that traffic? And what metrics matter to traffic? Like, how do you measure it? And there might be an array of different ways to measure the traffic that your website might be able to attract. So which of those metrics really matter, because it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. And finally, which traffic channels should you focus on, and what are the tactics you can use, therefore, to increase the amount of traffic you get? One offer that I kind of shared towards the end of last week's session was for you to get started on your free .ca website in case you do not already have a domain name or a website. There's a link on this slide. The slide deck will be shared with you at the end of today's webinar. So we have at Webnames this product called LightSite, which is an easy one-page website builder. You get a free .ca domain name for a full year. A website builder. There are 5 ready-to-use templates. Your website can be up and running in as little as 60 minutes. You don't need to share your credit card information right now. It's only going to be required at the time of renewal after that first year. So all you need to do is click on this link and get started. And once you have your website up and running, we're going to tell you in today's session how to get traffic to your website. So here are the 5 templates that we have on our LightSite platform. But if you've already attended last week's session and clicked on the link, you might already be aware of that. So a quick refresher of 3 things we spoke about last week. What the purpose of your website? What are the goals of your website? And what do you know about your audience? And all of these, which were helpful to decide what your website should look like, are equally helpful for you to understand how to get the right kind of traffic to your website. And I did mention this last week as well, because if you intend to trade online or transact online, enable e-commerce on your website, then the kind of audiences you're looking for can be slightly different. And where you might be able to find those audiences can be slightly different, because not everyone is comfortable transacting online. And the kind of website you need to build, therefore, will be different as well. So one key step in the know your audience part of things is to understand your buyers. As entrepreneurs, as business owners or prospective founders, you already know that you are building a product or a service with a certain set of audiences in mind. It would help for you to define them much more clearly by creating buyer personas. So a buyer persona is a personification of the different individuals who could potentially make up your target audience. It could be things like how old are they? Are they usually skewing more male or more female, etc.? And where do they get the information from when they are actually considering a service in that they would like to purchase? So it could be, what are the things that motivate them? Are they more inclined to make a purchase decision based on the quality of customer support, or are they extremely price conscious, or are they very brand focused and therefore they would like to choose premium brands and luxury brands. So there can be all these different kind of questions that you would need to understand, which will help you decide where to find these kinds of customers. So most businesses will have at least one primary buyer persona and at least one secondary buyer persona, because the narrower your buyer persona is, the smaller the target audience that you can actually reach will be. So there are a few useful tools that can actually help you visualize what the buyer personas could look like, and it asks you sort of leading questions to help you build your buyer persona. I have linked to the HubSpot Make My Persona tool over here, which I believe is a great tool for especially small startups and early stage startups, because it just asks you all the right questions about who do you think is the right person to buy your product or service, which social media platforms do they use, do they get information from word of mouth from their social circles, or do they actively go and research on forums like Reddit? And it helps you, therefore, think about them and gain an understanding of who your customer is. It helps you put yourself in the customer's shoes, and that will allow you to identify where you can find more such people to attract to your website. So I would highly recommend that you use these 2 or 3 links here to try and build comprehensive buyer personas. The sweet spot for the number of personas your business should be targeting is, I would say, between 2 and 5. Any more than that is probably spreading yourselves too thin, especially for a small business. Any fewer than 2, which is basically 1, might be too niche, and you might not be asking the right questions in that sense. Once you know who your customers are, once you have a defined buyer persona, the next step becomes what is the customer's journey towards the decision of actually choosing to purchase your product. For instance, in the graphic that you see on this slide, it's sometimes, if it's an impulse purchase, like if it's just a bar of candy on the checkout counter of your grocery store, then there really isn't too much of a journey involved, where it's literally an impulse purchase. But in most cases, customers do, depending on the type of product, customers do spend a lot of time thinking about it, maybe doing comparison shopping, maybe looking at reviews online, maybe asking friends for their impressions, maybe reading a blog about it somewhere, etc. And typically the story would start at the top of the funnel when they become aware of such a category of products even existing. And that's the central line that you see here, where it starts with awareness, then they become interested in it, then they are considering a few options and brands, then they make the purchase. But it does not necessarily end there. If it is a subscription-based business, there might be an opportunity to try and retain the customer to ensure they renew your service. And if everything goes well at that point, a happy customer can even become an advocate for your brand and help you bring other customers to your company. And the path to this, the different traffic channels, as we marketers refer to, are what you see in the dotted line, the wave that flows through these different steps of the purchase funnel. This 6-step color journey is what we refer to in marketing or sales terms as the purchase funnel. And it encompasses all the steps involved for a customer to go from becoming aware of such a product to eventually becoming a brand ambassador or advocate for your product. Once you have your customer personas, it is ideal that you try and build a few customer journeys and the different places where people might become either aware, or, for instance, if they are in the consideration phase, what is a customer likely to do? They are probably likely to look for news reports, where your company or the product has been mentioned. They are likely to have visited your website once and maybe filled out the lead form, but dropped off and not completed the purchase. So maybe you can send them an email with more information. They might read some reviews on the web at the consideration stage, whereas at the retention stage, once they've already bought the product, their questions might be a lot more in terms of, hey, how do I make sure this is delivering enough value to me? Or how is the quality of their customer support? Or questions that you can address on your knowledge base. How do I make this thing work? Right. So it's interesting because this is not a template that would fit for every single business. Your business or service might have a very different layout where the platforms involved, the channels involved could be significantly different from what you see here. And that's why it's important for you to create a version of the customer journey for each persona that you are building. Once you have that, you will be able to create marketing campaigns and traffic generation campaigns and tactics for each of these different steps in your customer's journey. We spoke briefly about the desired goals or outcomes from your website. So if it's a brochure website, the objective is typically for lead generation. If it's e-commerce, your objective is sales. If it is a software as a service or a platform as a service, then you are aiming to get your customers to subscribe to your service. So this is where we're going to get into the metrics and measurement side of things, because having goals that work at a yearly or a quarterly or a monthly level is all great. And those goals are typically in hard numbers like revenue generated or number of customers who have expressed interest. Now, how does the metrics on your website, how do they translate into the goals that actually matter to you? So we're going to look at a few tools that can help you measure the traffic on your website. The most popular and the most prominent among them is Google Analytics, which is a free tool. All you need to do is just go to analytics.google.com. This will be linked to in one of the later slides. It was also linked to on the resources handout that was sent last week. Once you've signed up for Google Analytics, it's at the end of that sign up process, it's going to give you a short piece of code that needs to be pasted on the header of literally every single page on your website. So most website builders, including our own LightSite, and any website builder out there, or if you're using a content management system such as WordPress, they all have plugins or tools where it'll tell you this is where you paste your analytics code. So whether you're using an analytics tool such as Firebase, which is usually for mobile apps, or Woopra or Crazy Egg or Google Analytics itself, integrating them is fairly easy. At least the basic version of integrating them is fairly easy. And you don't typically need a programmer to help you out with it. If you have a web developer who is going to help you build your website, you would typically ask them to do it for you. Otherwise, it's simple enough for you to do it on your own. But I would highly recommend that you have at least one of these tools. Aside from Google Analytics and Firebase, the others listed here are paid tools. And once the tool is installed, each of these tools has several different metrics by which to measure the traffic and the behavior of people on your website. So I'm going to get into which metrics would make sense for you. And there are other platforms that you might be using in tandem with your website, which would also be helpful. For instance, a customer relationship management tool, whether it is Salesforce or HubSpot or some other third-party product, all of those can be integrated into your website, especially if your website is built on WordPress. They all offer plugins that you can directly connect to your website and to your CRM, and they can pull data directly into the customer relationship management tool. So for instance, if you're generating leads, on the website. And after that, your objective is to call those leads or email those leads. When someone fills out a form on your website, HubSpot can automatically collect that data if you've installed the HubSpot plugin on WordPress, and that can trigger emails inside of HubSpot. So there's a lot of scope for automation over there, which can simplify your lives a lot and your sales teams or sales individuals' lives a lot. So when we look at analytics and the metrics that matter, the one tenet that is absolutely important is that the purpose of Google Analytics or any of these analytics tools is for you to diagnose things for patterns and issues. Analytics is not its own end game. And this is something that a few marketers often get caught up in, because as a marketer, it's great for me to be able to say, hey, I grew my traffic from 20,000 visits last month to 40,000 this month, which is great, but only if the additional 20,000 visits actually resulted in a growth in either my sales or my transactions or some other important business relevant metric that matters to us. And this is where the relevance of the traffic becomes comes into focus. So there are first order metrics, such as the ones I've listed on the left side as objectives, things like revenue or leads or sales and profits. If you're in the if you're in a fundraising space, then it's how much you've raised. Or if it's an app, then the number of installs. So focus on these metrics first, and all other metrics are a means to an end. So when for instance, things like bounce rates or the amount of time that customers spend on a particular page, they are all very useful, but they are all very useful for a narrow purpose when you're trying to either identify a problem where, for instance, in the example I gave you, traffic went up from 20,000 to 40,000. But if my sales did not move at all, then it's useful to see what did the other 20,000 people do. Did they spend any time on the page, or did they close it the moment they landed on it? Or did they all not browse beyond the first page where they landed on? In which case, maybe I just did not have enough links on that page, or maybe the information there was completely irrelevant. And these were people looking for something completely else, and they did not find what they were expecting on my website. So this is one key factor to remember when you're using analytics. And in order to help you ensure that your analytics setup is correct, and you can actually verify that it is working, there are a couple of links that I've provided here, one from Google and one from Hootsuite, which is also about Google Analytics setup. Those links will be helpful for you to when you're in the process of setting up Google Analytics. So there are several different tools within Google Analytics, things that can help you track goals. You can configure goals depending on the objective of your business. So a couple of links here as well, which will help you with that process of how to set up goals. There is another dimension to Google Analytics where it can actually track transactions on your website down to how much revenue you made and how many transactions occurred, how many people added products to the cart but did not complete the purchase and were therefore lost opportunities. That requires a slightly more advanced level of configuration when installing Google Analytics. It might not be applicable to all of you, but again, a couple of links that I've added on this slide will help you go through that process. In the next few screens, and I'm going to rush through the next 3 or 4 screens because not all of it is going to be relevant to all of you, but I'm sure some of it will be appropriate depending on the nature of your business. So these are some of my most frequently visited reports. For instance, the traffic reports, I've highlighted those 3 sections on the left side in this screen grab. I look at the channels, where traffic channel is basically where are people coming from. These are the default channels that Google Analytics uses. Organic search is people coming in through a Google search or a Bing search. Direct, as the name suggests, is people either typing in the URL and visiting your website or other traffic that Google is unable to determine. Uh, uh, Social, email are self-explanatory, and referral is basically when a third party website that is not you and that is not Google or one of the larger search engines sends a user to you because they have linked to you. And the Search Console is a window to how your website is performing on Google search. We briefly touched on the topic of Google Search Console last week as well, when I asked you to make sure that you're creating an account on Search Console. So the Search Console is kind of feeding into the Google Analytics platform, and that's why it's important over here. So on the traffic reports, the metrics that I usually monitor are any changes in the number of users who visited your website, sessions, how long they spend, conversions, and on the Search Console, for instance, you can track which keywords have you ranked higher for or gotten more traffic from as compared to previous months. Similarly, there are behavior reports which help you understand what do people do once they reach your website. In the traffic report, that told you about how do people get to your website, whereas the behavior report tells you once they're on your website, what do they do? So that tells you which pages are people visiting, where do they enter, which pages do they enter through. If you have e-commerce tracking or goals enabled, and it can tell you how much is that page bringing you in terms of revenue or conversions. If you do not have e-commerce tracking, but if you have something like a download button, which will trigger an ebook download or a form submission on your website, you can use a technique called event tracking to be able to measure those actions on your website. One report, again, that I look at a lot, because as Webnames, we are a conversion e-commerce based website. So this will give you a visualization of how many people came to your cart, and then they came to the next stage, which is where they have to create an account, the cart profile. How many of them dropped off at that stage? And in this screen grab, it's basically 95. And how many of them went to the confirmation page where their credit card information is, and how many of that ended up purchasing. So this is called a funnel visualization, which is very helpful for you to visualize where am I losing customers, where do my opportunities lie to improve the performance of the traffic that I have managed to acquire. So now that you know how to measure traffic that is on your website, how did they get there, and what they're doing on your site, let's look at the different traffic channels, sources that might drive traffic to your website, and how you can use, what tactics you can use to try and grow this traffic. So direct traffic, as I already mentioned, direct traffic is usually a result of people just recognizing your brand or having heard about it somewhere. It could be a brochure that was shared offline. It could be a friend that referred them to it. It could be word of mouth because you have great service and somebody came across your reviews. So the one thing that's key here is your choice of domain name. This was a point that we discussed last week as well, that you should pick a domain name that is short as you can afford, that's easy to remember, and that directly ties into your company name or your brand name. Make sure that your domain name is easy to remember. Avoid characters in the domain name, such as a hyphen or an underscore, because more often than not, people forget it. The number of syllables that you have, if you've not set up your business or named your business yet, we would recommend that you have not more than 2 syllables in your primary brand name. So that's a factor to consider as well. And once you have launched your website, make sure that, I don't need to tell this, as business owners or prospective owners, you know that great service is what's going to keep bringing customers back to you. So try and build that case so that your existing customers can become advocates for your brand. And one thing that we as marketers often joke about, at least internally, is we go and ask our designers on any collateral they make to make our logo bigger. Uh, it's sort of an inside joke because marketers want to see our brand and logo to dominate uh, any of the marketing collateral we make. But in reality, the purpose or the takeaway here is don't be afraid to put your brand name out there when you are discussing things on a public forum. For instance, if you're answering questions on a online community like Facebook groups or Reddit, sometimes it can come across as crass or out of context. Obviously, I'm not recommending that you do that to drop the name of your brand. But if you are indeed an authority on a topic and you're responding to a question on that platform, it definitely does not hurt for you to say, answer the question as to the best extent that you possibly can, and then say, this is who I am, and we help do these things. So give us a try if you feel like it. And just getting that brand name out is really, really important, especially in the early stages of your website. And that's going to help you drive up the direct traffic you can attract. Moving on to search engine optimization. Now, search engine optimization can be a webinar in its own. I know that there are courses that span months where you can learn search engine optimization, but it totally depends on how deep you want to go. But I would also say that it's the easiest thing to get started. Do not get disillusioned by all the complexity and jargon that people like me throw out, because it's what we do for a living, but that doesn't mean it's inaccessible to you. The first and most important part of search engine optimization is that your content needs to be on point. And when I say your content, it's every decision you make about what are you naming your page, what are the links on your menu, what are the words that make up those links, what are the words that go into your different pages on the website. This is the information that Google or Bing uses to decide whether your website gets ahead of a similar looking competitor's website on those search rankings. It's at least one of the most important factors that helps you in that process. So there are two parts to search engine optimization. There's technical search engine optimization, which ensures that when Google crawls your website, which is the process by which Google sends a program that visits your website, all the pages on your website, and tries to understand what you're talking about, which products do you focus most on, or what services do you focus most on. And technical SEO aims to make sure that Google is able to do all of that without any hassles. Because if, for instance, there's a link which contains the wrong address, then that is a sign to Google that your website is maybe not up to scratch or not professional. So that results in a 404 page. There are a number of aspects here, like a robots.txt file is basically like a warning board to Google to say, hey, these are the pages that I want you to visit, but there are some pages that I'm still working on. Do not visit those because I'm not ready to publish them online yet. So your menus, the kind of links you have on your footer, the amount of internal linking between the different pages of your website, the headers, the titles, the paragraphs, are your images appropriately named and titled? All of these are factors which can contribute to technical SEO. Like I said, there is really no end to how deep you can go, but when you are launching a website is the best time for you to be able to make sure your technical SEO is correct. So it does not require a whole lot of effort. You use a platform like WordPress or one of the more popular website builders, or even our own website builder, products like Lightsite or our WordPress BoldGrid website builder. They all take care of the technical SEO bit out of the box. So make sure that you are well set up for that part of it. Uh, and the next step is off-page SEO, which is where you try to add signals to Google that your website is creditable, it is reputed in the service or the industry that you are in. And you do that in a few different ways. The number of people or websites that link back to your website or name your brand on your local newspaper, your local media website. So if they talk about you, that is an indication to Google that yes, this company is indeed in this business, and some other reputable source like a Vancouver Sun, if it is in Vancouver, or the Calgary Herald, they are linking to it, and they are a source of mainstream news media. So maybe I should take them with some more seriousness and give them more credit. And there are more than 500 factors which decide exactly how the search rankings are going to work. But all of these factors matter, and therefore the choice of words on your website is going to be an indicator. So for instance, if you're a local focused website, in the sense that if you have a store and your website is the online version of that, and you offer services within a certain geographic area, then you can focus on keywords that are completely local. For instance, right at the bottom, I have a few examples here, like an Edmonton roofing services or best landscaping in Calgary. So those sort of keywords will help you optimize your website for searches that are very narrowly focused, because Google does a really good job of recognizing where an individual is searching from and redirecting them to services that are located in the same area. How does Google know that you are in the same area? It's because you have added these keywords as part of your website content, and also because you have your Google My Business profile, which we spoke about last week. I've also linked to that here. So if you've not set that one up, I would highly recommend that you do it. And other items like Google Search Console, which we've already spoken about. Now there's another tool called the Google Keyword Planner, which basically it's primarily used for advertising on Google search, but it can also help you discover what are the words that visitors to your website today, what are the queries that they are searching for when they find your website or your competitor's website. So when you are, you might be thinking of yourselves, or at least in our case as web names, we think of ourselves as web domain registrars and web hosting providers first, but there are indeed folks who find us for corporate DNS hosting, which is a pretty niche product, but it is something we offer. And I can discover this by looking at the Google Search Console or Google Keyword Planner. And once I realize that, I can create more pages on my website, which will cater to those audiences better. So yeah, that SEO, like I said, once you've achieved a certain amount of scale, you can even contract an agency to do it. There are tools which can do some parts of it for you. But this is probably the one source of traffic for your website, which can be sustainable over the long term. It can be really hard for you to get on the first page of Google for every keyword. It's practically impossible. So identify a few keywords where you want to succeed in, and make changes, incremental changes week over week, and you will surely but slowly start seeing those results. And it's essentially free if you leave out the amount of time and research that you would be investing into it. And that does not need to be a lot, especially if you are focused on a local geography. Moving on to paid traffic. Um, in the paid search space, there is primarily Facebook ads, which I will cover in the social part of things. But there's Google and there are Bing ads. There are also other ad platforms. But for most early stage businesses, I think Google and Bing is plenty. Uh, Now, there are two different formats of ads broadly. One is display advertising, which is where you see banners like when you're browsing third party websites. You see banners displaying a story or the product itself, if it is items like jewelry or clothing. So display advertising is highly recommended for if your product or service, I mean, if your product is a physical good or if it's a service that has a visual aspect to it, like a spa or a salon, um, or in the case of remarketing. So remarketing is when somebody has visited your website once uh, and they did not complete the purchase or the transaction or whatever goal you have. In that case, you have a demonstration of intent that the person cared to visit your website. So you can place a cookie on their browser and show them the same ad or show them another ad which will entice them to come back to your website. Uh, so depending on, I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with this. For instance, if you browse the product on Amazon or another retailer, then those ads seem to sort of chase you for a next day or two. And that's basically remarketing at work. It's entirely possible to do remarketing without being overly creepy and literally chasing you down those alleys. And it's incredibly cheaper in comparison to convincing a person from scratch to visit your website for those paid campaigns. So both Google and Bing, and in fact, Facebook as well, give you ways to use remarketing. And if you do want to focus on paid traffic as your primary source of getting traffic to your website, we would recommend hiring an expert or hiring an agency because it's easy to experiment or lose money because it's easy to get traffic to your website. It's not easy to always get all of them to convert because that would depend on the quality of the targeting that the campaigns use. On social media, of course, there are boosted posts, which are basically your regular posts expanded to audiences who don't follow your page or your website already. If you are in a business which relies on lead generation rather than transactions online, I can recommend a tool known called Growbots, which is pretty effective at segmenting people and identifying them through their job descriptions. It's especially effective for B2B sort of businesses. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is another powerful tool which can let you send emails to people who might fit your audience description and to generate links as well. One tip about paid traffic, like we spoke about Google Analytics, where you install a code or a pixel on your website that lets you monitor results. All these paid search platforms have algorithms which can automatically optimize who they are showing your ad to. And for that, they need to know, I sent a customer to your website. Did they finish the desired action? In this case, the desired action could be completion of an e-commerce sale. By placing a cookie that they provide called as conversion pixel or conversion tracking pixel, you will be able to tell Google or Bing that this is the kind of customer I want, send me more of these. And the algorithm will automatically adapt and send you more such folks as long as your campaign is running within budget. So that's highly recommended if you choose to use paid traffic as your source of traffic. We spoke about referral traffic. As I said, it's when people link to you and therefore send traffic your way. In most cases, this is coming from a relevant audience, relevant source. For instance, if you are running a restaurant, it could be Yelp that is sending you traffic. It could be a food blogger who visited your restaurant and left a favorable review for an item that they had at your restaurant. So it relies a lot on things like listicles or review websites. In some cases, there might be paid affiliate marketing programs after at the end of which that website links to you, and they have a program where you give them a commission for every sale they refer to you. Uh, so if you are in an industry where something like this makes sense, or if there are aggregators, like for instance Yelp, which is good for maybe restaurants and certain businesses, that's a good source of referral traffic. Some other good sources are your local media. They could be your vendors. For instance, if you are reselling a product or a service from another larger provider, then they might have a partners page where you can get linked, and that can be a source of referral traffic. It can also be a powerful tool to improve your search engine rankings. And if you are able to produce white papers, or if you run a survey and that survey results are very interesting, then you might be able to publish that and get quoted on local media, or get quoted on industry forums or by other experts, all of which is able to drive traffic to your website, introduce your website to more people. Another option is to just leverage your personal social network, folks that you know. If they have other websites, you can get them to link to you or make you a referral. And if you have the opportunity, you can engage with folks in the press and influencers in your industry. A lot of the referral traffic items can be very industry dependent. It doesn't work very well for something like mining, whereas it can work amazingly well for something like clothing. So that's why the exercise of customer journey and customer persona help you decide whether this type of traffic, this source of traffic will be applicable to you or not. Today, email traffic is literally the highest return